Are you done fixing that tire, or are you planning to rob me after? The woman's voice sliced through the rain before the jack even settled. Black SUVs boxed her in from both sides of the highway, shoulder within moments. What had looked like a flat tire on an empty road was already becoming something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous than either of them had expected. The men stepping out of those vehicles saw a soaked woman kneeling beside a luxury SUV. Within minutes, they were going to learn they were looking at the only person there who understood what was really wrong. She didn't flinch at his tone. Nadia Rowe only tightened the final lug nut, set the wrench down on the wet pavement, and rose slowly, rain sliding off the hood of her old canvas jacket. She was taller than he'd guessed when she'd been crouched near the wheel, broader in the shoulders too, with the kind of stillness that didn't belong to a nervous roadside drifter. Whatever irritation had flashed through his voice met something in her that refused to be insulted into carelessness. The single mother had spent the whole day chasing small jobs across the county, patching transmissions, swapping brake pads, and stretching every bill until it almost tore. Her daughter, Mira, was home with a neighbor, probably pretending not to worry, probably staring at the kitchen clock, the way she always did when her mom said she'd be back before dinner, and the sky turned dark before she could make good on it. She had stopped because a stranded driver on the side of the road was still a stranded driver, no matter how polished the car or how sharp the words. People like to think kindness belonged to people who could afford it. In her experience, it was usually the other way around. The man stood near the rear passenger door, one shoe sinking into gravel, one hand gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles showed pale, even in the wash of hazard lights. He wore a fitted charcoal coat over clothes too expensive for the shoulder of a service road, and everything about him said he lived in rooms where other people opened doors before he reached them. His face was composed, but his eyes kept cutting down the road and then back to her, measuring risk, revising it, measuring again. That was when the first black SUV swung in behind his vehicle and braked. Then came another and another. Doors opened almost in unison. Men in dark suits stepped out with the quick, controlled movement of people trained to assume the worst before anyone else even noticed it. One of them barked an order into the night. Another scanned the tree line. A third locked eyes with Nadia and headed toward her like the rain itself had given him a target. The man's posture changed at once. Not relaxed, not relieved, recognized. So he wasn't just rich. He was protected. The nearest guard stopped 3 feet away, gaze dropping to the tire iron at Nadia's feet before rising to her face. His expression held that particular kind of contempt reserved for laborers found too close to money. "Step back from the vehicle," he said. "Now." Nadia raised both hands a little, more tired than intimidated. Tires changed. Jack's still under load. If you move it too fast, you'll shift the balance. I said step back. She took 1 step, no more. Rain tapped the metal rim behind her and hissed on the hot hood of one of the new arrivals. The man opened his mouth like he meant to explain, then shut it again when a second guard reached his side. He wasn't scared of Nadia. He was scared of whatever had made this response necessary. That was when she looked back at the wheel she'd just finished. The blowout had bothered her from the start. Tires failed all the time, but not like that. The tear along the sidewall hadn't looked random. The scoring near the inner edge had been too neat, too controlled, and the brake line behind the assembly had a faint shine where rain should have dulled everything evenly. She had noticed it while kneeling in the water, but the man had been tense. Traffic had been rushing by, and she told herself she would mention it once he calmed down. Now the convoy was here. Now men with earpieces and sidearms were treating a flat tire like an active threat. And now her stomach tightened with the old instinct she had spent years trying to bury under invoices, overtime, and school pickup schedules. The guard in front of her followed her gaze. "What are you looking at?" Nadia didn't answer right away. She crouched despite the warning in the guard's face, reached toward the wheel well, then stopped short of touching it. The rain had cleared the dust enough for her to see it cleanly now. Not road damage, not where, not coincidence. Careful, deliberate tampering. When she stood again, the calm in her had changed shape. "You don't want him driving this car," she said. The man stared at her. The lead guard took one step closer. Highway lights flashed across wet metal, black paint, and the thin silver line of danger hidden behind the wheel. And for the first time that night, every eye on the shoulder turned exactly where she was looking. Rain hammered the asphalt as the head of security followed the mechanic's gaze into the wheel well. For a moment the man said nothing, only squinting through the glare of hazard lights reflecting off the wet metal. "What exactly are you implying?" he asked. Nadia Rowe wiped her hands slowly on the rag hanging from her back pocket. "I'm not implying anything," she said evenly. "I'm telling you that the tire wasn't the real problem." The guard straightened, irritation flashing across his face. "We didn't ask for a diagnosis. You were asked to change a tire." "And I did," Nadia replied quietly. "But you might want to look closer before you send him back onto the highway." The security team exchanged brief glances. The convoy engines idled behind them, deep and steady like restrained thunder. Traffic roared past in bursts of white headlights, spraying mist across the shoulder. Vincent Hale stepped forward from the shelter of the open SUV door. His voice carried calm authority now, far different from the sharp tone he'd used earlier. "What do you think you see?" Marcus Trent, his head of security, turned slightly toward him. "Sir, I suggest we handle this internally." Vincent didn't move his eyes from the mechanic. "I asked her." Nadia crouched again beside the wheel, careful not to touch anything this time. Rain trickled down the rim as she pointed toward the thin black brake line tucked just behind the rotor. "You see that shine right there?" Marcus leaned closer despite himself. "That's rain." "Not quite," Nadia replied. "Rain would coat the whole line. That spot's clean. Someone wiped it recently." The guard's jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean sabotage." "No," Nadia agreed calmly. "But the scoring on the sidewall does." Vincent stepped closer. His coat darkened with rain as he bent slightly to see where she was pointing. "What scoring?" Nadia traced the air just above the tire's shredded edge. "Those cuts are too uniform," she explained. "A blowout from road debris tears jagged. This one was weakened first. But the brake line behind it, that's what would finish the job." The words hung in the rain. Marcus's expression hardened. And how exactly would a roadside mechanic know that? Nadia didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, looking out at the dark highway stretching beyond the guardrail. Headlights streaked past like distant comets. When she spoke again, her voice carried that same steady calm. "Because I've seen it before." Marcus took a step closer. "Where?" Nadia met his eyes. "Vehicles designed to look safe until they hit 70 miles an hour." Vincent's gaze sharpened. The security team shifted uneasily. One of the guards leaned down to examine the brake line more closely. "Marcus," the man murmured. Marcus crouched beside him, frowning. The rain had washed the area clean enough now that the mark Nadia pointed out was impossible to ignore. A thin cut, barely visible beneath the protective coating. Marcus's breath slowed. "That's not road damage," Nadia finished quietly. Vincent straightened, his expression cooling into something sharper than irritation. "Could it fail immediately?" Nadia shook her head. "No, that's the point." Marcus looked up at her. "What do you mean?" Nadia glanced toward the convoy of black SUVs lined along the shoulder. "Whoever did it didn't want the car to fail here," she said. "They wanted it to fail later." Vincent's voice dropped. "At speed?" Nadia nodded. Marcus rose quickly, turning to his team. "No one moves that vehicle." The command snapped through the rain like a whip. Two guards immediately blocked the road lane behind the disabled SUV, while another scanned the surrounding woods with a flashlight. Vincent crossed his arms, studying the quiet mechanic standing in front of him. "You noticed this while fixing the tire?" "Part of it." And you didn't say anything earlier? Nadia shrugged faintly. You were in a hurry, and I wasn't sure yet. Marcus faced her again. You're telling me you spotted a professional sabotage job in 5 minutes on the side of a highway? Nadia glanced back at the wheel. Closer to 3. Marcus exhaled slowly, frustration warring with logic. The rain continued to fall harder now, drumming against the convoy roofs. Vincent tilted his head slightly. What's your name? Nadia Rowe. Marcus studied her more carefully now. Grease-stained boots, old jacket, calloused hands. Nothing about the woman fit the calm certainty she'd just shown. Marcus spoke again, slower this time. If this is sabotage, then whoever did it expected him to drive away. Exactly. Vincent looked at the damaged wheel. And if we had, Nadia met his gaze. You probably wouldn't make it to the next exit. Silence followed. Even the traffic seemed quieter for a moment. Marcus turned to one of his men. Full sweep of the vehicle. The guard nodded and moved immediately. Vincent remained where he was, watching the mechanic in the rain. You stopped because you wanted to help, he said. Yeah. And now you're telling me someone tried to kill me. Nadia didn't look away. I'm telling you someone set a trap. Marcus stepped back toward them. If that's true, he said slowly, then we have a bigger problem. Vincent nodded. Yes? Then he looked again at the single mother standing beside the wheel. Which means, he added, we might also have the right person standing in the rain. Marcus frowned. Sir. Vincent gestured toward Nadia. She saw something my entire security team missed. Marcus looked at the mechanic again. Rain ran down Nadia's hairline, but she didn't move. Ms. Rowe, Marcus said carefully, how exactly did you learn to spot something like this? Nadia hesitated. Not long, just long enough for the old life she'd buried to brush briefly against the present. Let's just say, she said quietly, I used to work around vehicles that people really wanted destroyed. Marcus stared at her. The rain grew heavier, and for the first time since the convoy arrived, the most powerful people on that dark stretch of highway were listening to the quiet mechanic. Marcus Trent remained crouched beside the wheel long after Nadia finished speaking. Rainwater slid down the edge of the SUV and dripped steadily onto the pavement, forming a thin stream that ran toward the gutter of the shoulder. The security chief didn't like what he was seeing, and he liked even less that the woman who'd spotted it first was standing there in worn boots with a socket wrench still lying beside her. Flashlight, Marcus said. One of his men handed it over instantly. The beam cut through the rain and illuminated the brake assembly. For several seconds, Marcus said nothing. The thin incision in the line was almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. He did now. That's clean work, he muttered. Nadia nodded once. Too clean for highway debris. Marcus straightened slowly, water running off the brim of his collar. Full inspection, engine compartment, undercarriage, electronics, everything. 2 guards moved immediately, sliding under the SUV with portable lights, while another opened the hood. Vincent Hale watched the operation unfold with quiet intensity. The executive's calm exterior hid a mind that was already running through possibilities. Someone had sabotaged his vehicle. Someone had done it precisely enough that his own security detail had missed it. And the only reason he knew now was because a single mother with grease on her hands had decided to stop and help. His gaze shifted to Nadia again. She wasn't watching him. She was watching the road, not the convoy. The road. Traffic blurred past in long streaks of white and red light. Rain hammered against the asphalt in steady waves. Nadia finally spoke. How long was the car parked before the tire blew? Vincent answered without hesitation. 10 minutes. Marcus glanced at him. At the gas station, he clarified. I stepped inside to take a call. Nadia nodded slowly. That's enough time. Marcus crossed his arms. Enough time for what? For someone to weaken the tire and prep the brake line. One of the guards slid out from under the SUV, wiping rain from his face. Marcus, he said quietly. Marcus turned. What is it? The guard held up a small piece of metal he'd found lodged near the suspension. Marcus took it and examined it in the flashlight beam. A thin wedge of steel, sharpened on one side. Marcus's expression hardened. Spike insert, he muttered. Vincent stepped closer. Meaning? Nadia answered before Marcus could. It's designed to finish tearing the tire after the cut weakens it. Vincent's eyes narrowed. So whoever did this expected the tire to fail at speed. Yeah, Nadia said. Marcus looked between the two of them. That's still only half the problem. Nadia nodded. The brake line. Marcus held up the steel wedge, and the rain intensified, pounding against the convoy vehicles. One of the security drivers approached Marcus quickly. Sir, we may have something else. Marcus turned sharply. What? The driver pointed toward the rear of the SUV. Look at the tread pattern. Marcus crouched again. Nadia followed his gaze. The wet pavement revealed something that hadn't been visible before. A faint, oily sheen trailing from the back tire. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's hydraulic fluid. Vincent went still. Nadia exhaled slowly. Brake pressure would have dropped fast once the line opened. Marcus rose again, running a hand through rain-soaked hair. This wasn't random. No, Nadia said quietly. It was planned. The security chief turned toward the dark highway stretching ahead. Planned for where? Nadia followed his gaze. Whoever did this expected you to drive away. Marcus crossed his arms. And now we haven't. Right. The security chief frowned. So what does that mean? Nadia glanced down the road again. Rain blurred the distant curve. It means the plan just changed. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Changed how? Nadia looked at the convoy, then at the dark road beyond it. If I were the one who set that trap, she said quietly, I wouldn't stop at one. Vincent's voice dropped. You think there's more? Nadia met his eyes. I think someone out there expected this convoy to crash tonight. The rain continued falling. The convoy engines hummed, and suddenly the quiet roadside repair felt less like a delay and more like the beginning of something far worse. Rain continued to pour over the convoy, turning the shoulder of the highway into a slick ribbon of reflected light. The guards moved quickly now, crouching beside wheels, checking undercarriages, scanning electronics with small handheld devices. Marcus Trent stood in the middle of it all, watching the quiet mechanic who had just overturned the entire security assessment of the evening. You're saying someone planned for the car to fail at that turn? Marcus said. Nadia nodded once. And you're saying that if we'd driven off 10 minutes ago, you'd probably be cleaning wreckage out of the guardrail right now, Nadia finished. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. That possibility settled into the air like a weight. Vincent Hale wrapped his arms lightly around himself against the cold rain, though his mind was moving too fast to notice the weather anymore. Marcus, he said calmly, assume the sabotage is real. Marcus looked at him. Yes, sir. Then assume whoever did it hasn't given up just because we stopped. Marcus turned toward his team. Expand the perimeter, 200 yards both directions. Guards moved instantly, spreading along the roadside and into the dark tree line with flashlights. Nadia watched them go. They're looking in the wrong place, she said quietly. Marcus glanced at her. What do you mean? If someone wanted this to happen at speed, they didn't need to watch the crash, Nadia explained. They just needed to make sure you left. Vincent stepped closer. So the person who did this could already be gone. Maybe. Marcus frowned. Or maybe they're waiting to see if the trap worked. Nadia didn't disagree. Thunder rolled faintly across the distant hills. One of the guards hurried back toward Marcus. Sir, convoy vehicles 2 and 3 are clear. Marcus nodded. Keep checking. The guard jogged off again. Vincent studied the disabled SUV. How long would the brake line have held if we'd kept driving? Nadia crouched again beside the wheel. At highway speed, she said. Maybe a mile. Maybe less. Marcus followed the calculation in his head. That curve is half a mile away. Exactly. Vincent looked down the dark road again. Meaning the failure would have happened right in the turn. Marcus ran a hand down his jaw. Whoever did this knew the route. Nadia stood again. Or studied it. The rain eased slightly, leaving a steady hiss on the pavement. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered quickly. Trent. A voice spoke urgently through the speaker. Marcus's expression changed. Say that again. He listened another few seconds before hanging up. What is it? Vincent asked. Marcus looked at him. The fuel crew at the last stop just reported a suspicious vehicle. Vincent's eyes sharpened. What kind? White cargo van. Parked across the lot for about 15 minutes. Nadia spoke quietly. Same window of time your car was unattended. Marcus nodded slowly. Exactly. Vincent frowned. Did anyone get a plate number? Marcus shook his head. No cameras facing that direction. Nadia exhaled. That's not sloppy, she said. That's deliberate. Marcus studied her. You're awfully confident about that. Nadia met his gaze calmly. People who plan something like this don't improvise. Vincent crossed his arms again. Then the question becomes obvious. Marcus finished the thought. Who wants you dead? Vincent's expression hardened slightly. Quite a few people, actually. Nadia raised an eyebrow. That's comforting. Vincent almost smiled despite the tension. Marcus looked toward the repaired SUV again. If that van followed the convoy, the driver knows the plan failed. Nadia said, which means they'll adjust. Another guard jogged toward them. Sir, remaining vehicles are clear. Marcus exhaled with relief. At least the convoy itself is safe. Nadia glanced back at the disabled SUV. Except that one. Marcus nodded. We'll tow it. Nadia shook her head. Marcus frowned. What? If the brake line's cut the way I think it is, towing could trigger the failure too.